I'm Alison Morris and I'm a security correspondent and columnist with the Irish News. What we're going to do is we're going to give each of the candidates 3 minutes to introduce themselves and speak about why they got into politics and the obvious thing about the barriers that still exist in relation to political change in Northern Ireland. We're going to just start from this side. So Chris, if you want to introduce yourself first, say what party you're from, and just give a brief sort of 3 minutes about what enticed you into politics.
Okay. Do you want me to stand up or will I just...
No, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, grand. I'm just going to actually time myself here because I don't know how long.
I'll time you.
Okay, will you tell me? That's okay, that's fine. I'll just actually have a thing here so I know roughly. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this in my life, so I just want to sort of make everybody aware of that. So my name is Chris McCall. I'm the Alliance candidate for Foyle in the upcoming election. Why did I get involved in politics? Well, I didn't mean to, is the honest answer to that question. When I was born into quite a sort of traditional unionist community in Coleraine, realised I was gay from quite a young age. I didn't sort of really make very much of it until I came out in school in lower sixth. I had a bit of a hard time. I had quite a lot of sort of, well, not a lot of bullying, but you had a lot of the sort of the nasty comments and whatever that are made to you. And I decided sort of when I was about 17 or 18, I hate Northern Ireland. I want to get away from here. So I lived for a while in England. I lived for a while in Germany. I studied in Germany for a while. I lived in Dublin for a couple of years as well. And then I got a job offer from Invest NI. I moved back here. And I thought, right, okay, I'll give Northern Ireland another chance. I had heard about there had been sort of civil partnerships and all the rest, but I thought maybe things are different. And I moved back here in December 2012 at the time of the flag protests. And I had an apartment on the Newton Ards Road. So it wasn't the best time to move back to Northern Ireland. And I just thought, right, if this is the sort of thing that's still going on here, I either have to leave again or I have to get involved. And so I made the decision to get involved. Now, I'll be perfectly honest, Alliance wasn't the first party that I joined. I had always voted for Alliance, but the first party I joined, I'm not entirely sure if it exists anymore, if that gives you any clue as to what it was. But if it does exist, I don't think it's in very good shape anyway, but it was a bit of a shambles. I stood as a candidate in the council elections mainly because I had got myself sort of dug too far into it. I thought I'll see what happens here, but I had decided I was going to join Alliance anyway. And the reason that I joined Alliance is because I believe in what Alliance stands for a fair society, for a shared future for everyone in Northern Ireland. I believe there's still a lot to be done with regard to things like the blood ban, with things like the conscience clause as well that was suggested by the DUP only last year. There's a lot of issues that still have to be dealt with in Northern Ireland with regard to the LGBT community, but I believe that we're on the right track. I think we are convincing people of our point of view, and I hope that maybe continues a bit further as well. So I'd like to just take the opportunity as well to thank Pride very much for inviting me here this evening, and I look forward to a good, respectful and productive discussion this evening. Thank you.
And just before Malachy introduces himself, I think it's worth pointing out the DUP were invited and weren't able to put anybody forward. So Malachy, do you want to go ahead?
I think for the DUP we could put a Save Ulster from Sodomy placard down at the end of the room. They still haven't recanted that position. So my name is Malachy O'Hara. I'm quite proud to say that I'm the Green Party candidate for North Belfast, and welcome to my home constituency. I know some people have got nosebleeds crossing the border to come up the Antrim Road. So I was born at the lower end of the Antrim Road. I grew up with a grill on my window, and I used to think that the bands marching down the Crumlin Road were playing for me. I realised this was wrong when my neighbours were firebombed, our house was attacked, and it was the mid-80s and it began to become too dangerous, and we moved out and moved up the Cavehill Road. I attended St Malachy's College, and I was the first and only of my siblings to attend grammar school. I was teased there as many of the kids came from much more affluent homes. They got promises of cars and holidays when they were 16. I got a part-time job. I went to University of Birmingham, where I really became politically engaged. I suppose I was always engaged. One time when I was cleaning out my bedroom, I found a Form 1 religion book where I'd written something about Mandela being released and free elections in South Africa. So maybe there was always something in my subconscious about being an activist and striving for social justice. I attended demos and protests and got involved with a range of campaigns. I actually remember demonstrating about the Taliban. They were blowing up what were called the Buddhas of Bilyaman in March 2001, 6 months before many people had heard about the Taliban and before 9/11. I became involved in Stop the War as a local organiser. That proved fruitless. I returned to Northern Ireland in 2003-04, and I wasn't in the best of places. I got myself in a bad place in England with alcohol, substances, and other risky behaviours. I came home to the bosom of my family, unsure if they would accept me. They did, which was fantastic, but the first couple of years were not particularly easy going, but I would say now that things are fantastic. I'm very lucky, and I'm conscious that not all LGBT people are as lucky as me to have a loving and supporting family. I maintained my activism throughout the noughties, particularly in support of women's rights to choose. In 2009, I began professionally working for the Rainbow Project, so this became my bread and butter in terms of striving for LGBT equality. In 2011, I joined the board of Lighthouse, which is a local suicide prevention charity. In 2012, I was elected in a public meeting to the marriage campaign. Queer equality, women's equality, and health inequality are three of my driving political issues. This is social justice, and that's my motivator. I must say, thanks for Chris for being honest. I prevaricated over which party to join. In fact, I melted some people that are in this room, I melted their heads about which party to join, and I did that over about 18 months. I had an original reticence for the Green Party because, to be frank, environmentalism wasn't a huge motivator for me. However, as I got to know the party and its policies and its activists, I realised the interconnectedness of environmental justice with social justice. The same greed which wishes to widen the gap between the obscenely wealthy and the rest of society is the same greed which wishes to pillage our planet for short-term gain. It's the same greed which wishes to shut people out from effecting change, and it's the same greed which wants to keep women and minorities in their place. I'm proud in my short 18 months in the Green Party on what we've done. I've established our North and West Belfast branch. We've tripled our membership. We elected a gender balance of officers. I played a central role in coordinating our 18 candidates across the region, and the first time everyone in every constituency in the North can vote Green. As a member of the Queer Greens, I'm proud that our house mother, Claire Bailey, the representative for South Belfast, supported us in developing this group. Queer Greens have come a long way. We've updated our manifesto, and there are copies here for people to take away with them and see what our commitment to the next stages of LGBT equality is. We have ensured that LGBT candidates are not just nominated, but they're receiving profile. Earlier this week, our LGBT candidate in Foyle was on Talkback. Ellen today was at the Unison hustings, and George has already done the main cup hustings. So we're not just nominating LGBT candidates, we're giving them profile. I'm a social justice activist. This is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. It can be so much more better than it is today.
Okay, and before, I mean, this is probably of all the hustings that we'll attend, and I'm sure we're all quite, politically active here, and we'll be at several hustings, but it's probably the most diverse panel you'll see, and yet still we only have one woman on the panel. So, Sophie, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, how's it going? So I'm not going to use this to electioneer, pretty much because there's nobody here who can vote for me, so I'll save all my all my clever stuff for the good people of Upper Ban. Progressive Union's Party. I got involved in politics kind of for the same reasons as some other people here, but maybe from a different angle, because of the flag protests, because of how loyalism was treated and represented and perceived during the flag protests. So I felt that the community didn't have adequate political representation, they were going down a bad road, and that marginalisation could turn into self-marginalisation. So, the Millwall problem, no one likes us, we don't care. Or Johnny Adair, no one likes us, we don't give a f***. So I was trying to divert that into something positive. And one of the main reasons I felt I was able to join the PUP was because of Julianne Core Johnson, who was then Julianne Core. So Julianne in 2013 stood up at our party conference in Brownlow House in Lurgan and appealed to quite a mixed room. If you know the PUP, you'll know it's kind of a mixed party. There's some kind of more traditional unionists in it, and there's some progressives and younger people too. But in appealing to the party to support marriage equality, she referred to the principles of loyalism. Within that document, the main argument is basically that we want equal citizenship within the UK. So that was why in 1912 the UVF armed themselves. That was why in 1966 contemporary UVF resisted Irish republicanism. It was for equal citizenship. Arguments can be put as to how that was done, but so the conference accepted it. So whatever you might think of loyalism in terms of being a regressive or a right-wing ideology, this document is a progressive document. It has scope within it for us to be a diverse union of peoples. It has scope within it for women's equality. So as well as supporting marriage equality, we support a woman's right to choose. So as a unionist, there's no other party I could have joined. And the DUP are absent tonight, but that kind of represents their view on this. They don't need to come and listen because they already know their position, right? So they're not going to reform that in the face of evidence, whereas other parties might. And the other reason I got involved in politics was for class reasons. So working class unionists, as many of you probably know, haven't been too well served by mainstream unionism. So I believe that as citizens of the country that we're in, of the planet that we're in, we have a moral obligation to help other people, to show compassion towards other people. And that was one of the first arguments that Gusty Spence made in Long Kesh, was that we need to build a compassionate society. And he was talking about Catholics at the time, but you can extend that towards anyone. You can extend that towards LGBT citizens, towards people with disabilities who are going to be hit by welfare reform, towards women who are being criminalised for trying to terminate pregnancies they don't want. So for me, the PUP provides a route to that. And because Julianne kind of blazed a trail for other people like her to join, there's now a critical mass of young progressives there who show people that you don't have to leave unionism to be progressive. You can have all these values and still support the union. So that's why I got involved. Thank you.
No problem. Conor, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. My name's Conor Duncan from the SDLP. I'm standing in good old North Antrim, the foundation of where the DUP was obviously born, in Bandside, just a couple of miles down the road from me. For some would say, why would you even stand for the SDLP in such a unionist heartland? But I stand for reasons that I believe in a party obviously that was home to me from the early age of 19 when I joined it. Our parties went through many ups and downs. We're on a revival, I'm glad to say, and obviously the electorate can decide that on the 5th of May. But at 19 I joined a party because I believed in leaders, civil rights leaders, John Hume, Reid Rogers, Seamus Mallon. Those were the founding fathers for many of us. And they were a party that I associated myself with. They felt right to me to join. I got involved in politics because I was asked to join. It was the people told me to join. I didn't run for election because of my own choice sometimes. People said to me I was a local person, I was on the ground, I was in the community, I was involved in organisations. That obviously meant that I knew what people were wanting, and that's why I decided to stand. As I said before, we were a party of civil rights. We stood up in the early days because of being treated like second-class citizens, not given equality to voting, to housing, to many issues. I suppose that's sometimes an issue which we feel within the LGBT community, that we are treated as second-class citizens. And that's sometimes why I'm very proud to stand and say I'm an LGBT candidate for the SDLP. Because our party sometimes has been branded by many that we don't sometimes treat everyone equally, that we don't give opportunity. But my party gave me an opportunity to stand as an LGBT candidate. It has given me opportunity to go to hustings like this and many others and to be at the forefront. They even gave me the opportunity yesterday to be on Sky TV. Come on, the party's promoted me and given LGBT a good face. I suppose the early days, the Good Friday Agreement was seen as a foundation stone for giving equality to everyone in Northern Ireland. We've seen the establishment of the Human Rights Commission, the Equality Commission. Those were things that should have been all good for us. We shouldn't have been in the position we are now, where we're still fighting for marriage equality. We shouldn't be in that position because the Good Friday Agreement has been hollowed out by brinkmanship and doublespeak. We should have lasting peace and equality for everyone in this island, but we're not at that stage yet, and that fight must still continue. For me, obviously, I grew up, and being gay was sometimes a big issue for me. I didn't know where I fitted into society. But thankfully, through friends and family, I came to realise and understand who I was. I have no problem telling you I'm a Catholic. Some people say, how can you be gay and be a Catholic? But you can be. God's a loving person, as far as I can see, I was created in his image, and obviously I was born and created by him. I am who I am. And for others will tell me I'm wrong. Well, I'm sorry. That's not the God that I believe in. Maybe that's sometimes a hard pill to swallow for some folk. But I'm going to keep on with what I'm doing, because I believe the conversation will be won on marriage equality by the same ways the referendum was won in the South. That's having conversations with people, not bullying them, not having aggressive. Sometimes in the doors I've been told the LGBT community has been too aggressive in pushing the agenda. Now, that sometimes has been the case, but I'm willing to sit down and have those conversations with people, and that's the way we want to do it. Sitting at our kitchen tables, having the conversations with our mums and dads. My mum and dad were shocked when I said I was gay. They said, this was the end of the world. We'll not have children, we'll not have the big wedding. But that conversation, that talking to them, has changed. I'll go back to the marriage referendum in the South. That Saturday morning when the count started, my mother came running down to the bedroom, banging the door, and says to me, "Are you not watching the results?" And I sort of woke up and going, on a Saturday morning trying to have a lie-in, did I miss an election? I thought, dear Lord, is it all over? Little did I know my mother was so interested in what the people of the South were saying. She felt this was an opportunity she could stand up as a mother and support her son and stand proudly. And I'm glad to say that's a conversation we've had in our household, and it takes time for people to adapt, and I'm glad to keep that conversation going.
No problem. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Michael Greslone, and I am one of the 3 Sinn Féin candidates standing in South Down. I suppose in terms of where I come from, in terms of politics, I grew up in a Republican family. My father was a former Republican prisoner, so politics was something that was ingrained in you from a very early age. And my father would say to me, again at a very early age, about the proclamation, that it's not just an historical document, it's a living document, and it should be yours and mine, and everybody that believes in equality, that guiding light in terms of building an Ireland that is united, independent and free, and one that has equality at its heart. In terms of my own sort of political journey, I joined Sinn Féin at the age of 15, so I've now spent more than half my life in it. I became involved in LGBT rights as I was coming out. And as I'm sure many people in this room know, coming out is not something that happens in one day, it's something that you continually do. But I became very aware of the inequality that existed. And I began conversations with other Republicans and looking at how, what role can Sinn Féin do. And I spoke to older Sinn Féin members who took part in the march for Declan Flynn, who was murdered in a homophobic attack in 1981. And it was his murder that sort of spurred Sinn Féin into action, and that began the 30-year involvement of Sinn Féin with the LGBT rights. And in the early 1980s then we began to formulate policy in terms of campaigning against the criminalisation of what was then termed homosexuality, talking about full adoption rights for LGBT people. So we looked at all of that in terms of where we had come from and how we had plodded through the 1980s and 1990s. And then it was in the Kremlin where a few of us sat down quite a few years ago over a pint, and we talked about that, how the party's doing fantastic work up and down and right across Ireland, but we're not working in a uniform sense. So we said we'll set up our own LGBT group. And from then, we then had a meeting in Dundalk, and no matter what Mary Ellen Campbell says, I was not 2 hours late to that meeting. But it started with just 3 people at that meeting, and it's continued to grow and grow. And again, I believe in politics, and I think we're on the cusp of something absolutely fantastic here. In the next 5-10 years, we will see fundamental and amazing transformations in terms of our rights as citizens. And I think it's important that as political parties we work together in ensuring the marriage equality becomes law, ensuring that we end the blood ban, ensuring that lesbian, bisexual women receive the fertility treatments that they equally deserve. So there's work to be done. I think we'll get there. And on behalf of Sinn Féin, just to publicly announce, because I know it has been in the rumour mill in terms of some of the North Belfast papers, that Councillor Mary Ellen Campbell would be nominated on behalf of Sinn Féin to go forward as the Deputy Mayor for the party. So I just want to put that out there, because I know it has been in the papers, and that's just to confirm that on behalf of ourselves. So to finish, because I have 10 seconds left and I'd like to be on time, I think we're in a good place, and let's keep going. And I think in terms of the LGBT sectors, in terms of political parties, we're going to get there, and we are going to win. If we stick together, we're going to win. Thank you.
Before we go to Rodney, we have 5 gay candidates on the stage here, which is an unprecedented number. If you'd have thought back to politics in Northern Ireland 20 years ago, it would have been unthinkable. And speaking to Sean earlier this week, he is of the opinion there's a record number of openly LGBT candidates standing in this year's Assembly election. So that in itself is a record for Northern Ireland. Rodney at the other is our only non-gay candidate, so technically probably has the least to gain from coming here today. So he's to be welcomed, and do you want to introduce yourself, Rodney?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm Rodney McEwen, Ulster Unionist candidate for South Belfast. I suppose in some ways I'm more of a political veteran than some of the other panellists because I've been involved in politics for 16 or 17 years. In the post-agreement period and the implementation period, I was involved at Westminster, and I've sort of kept an interest since then, although I went off for a while and spent time as a lawyer, where I focused generally on criminal defence practice, human rights, and immigration and asylum appeals. And I suppose when I returned to politics, that is one area that drives my interest, which is human rights and equality. But also I'm very much an environmental green, and I think that's well known in terms of sustainability, transport, and a broader campaign for a better Belfast, better urban planning, more green space within the city, and a city, I suppose, and it's important to me that we have a city that respects difference and celebrates diversity, and that's also central to the campaign that I'm running at this election. I would like to move on to questions because I don't have a story to tell as such, but certainly I'm interested in what issues are there. Politics in Northern Ireland for far too often has been behind public opinion, and it would be nice if we could close the gap during post this election and into the next mandate. And I think there might be why your party, and I haven't been in any other party, but I think maybe Sophie summed it up quite well for me in terms of why I'm with the Ulster Unionist Party. Well, you don't have to leave unionism to be progressive, and I think that's probably where I sit politically.
We have a series of questions that have been submitted online. Some of the people are present and some of them aren't. This is an online question from someone who isn't present, and I'm actually going to go back to Chris on this because the question is, can a party really claim to be in favour of equality when not all of its MLAs will vote for equality? And I think for yourselves and for the Alliance, we know that there has been issues in the past where some party members have ignored the whip and have voted against certain issues. So I think that's a good question for you to start off with.
Okay, yes, absolutely. Start with the hard one. Well, it's no secret. Not all of our MLAs have always voted in favour of marriage equality when it's come before the Assembly. We took a decision as a party in 2012 to adopt marriage equality as a party policy, but we also took the decision that if our MLAs didn't vote in favour of it, that we were going to have the conversations to try and convince people to actually have the conversation, have the argument with them to vote in favour of it. And if you look actually at the last vote that was held in the Assembly, yes, okay, in the first vote that the Green Party brought forward to the Assembly, 4 of our MLAs didn't vote in favour. One of them wasn't there, one wasn't able to be there, but the other 3 voted against it. In the last vote, 2 of those MLAs voted in favour of it. One of them, unfortunately, did still vote against. 2 of them voted in favour. It shows you that policy actually does work, that it does convince people. It is, in my opinion, the Trevor Lunns, the Judith Cochrans of the world that we do have to be reaching out to, and we do have to be convincing of the message of equality. So that's where we stand.
Do you think that that people should be allowed to come to that journey and reach that decision themselves, rather than maybe some of the other parties which just put a whip across the party in relation to these things?
In all honesty, I do, because you can't whip society. You know, at the end of the day, you can bring people along on the journey. I mean, I know from members of my family, my family, as I was saying in my introduction, would be quite normal sort of Presbyterian people. They would have been, it was quite hard for me to sort of come out to them. My stepmom now asks me every time she sees me if I have a boyfriend. Unfortunately, the answer is no, but there you go. But it shows you can change people's minds, you can change people's outlook. It's all very well and good to be saying that we are in favour of marriage equality, but if you're not going to bring people on the journey along with you, then there's a limited distance that you can really go, as far as I can see.
Yeah, Conor, the SDLP have had a similar issue, whereas some people have voted for, some have been in the toilet or somewhere else at the time when the votes have been taken. I mean, what is your opinion on that?
At the end of the day, our party is about having the conversation. You know, there is no whip there in place. 2012, at our 41st conference, we passed a motion on marriage equality. Now, that obviously protects church, obviously brought lots of people's opinion into it, but we had a serious conversation as a party. We decide with our membership at conference what policies we set out and what's our position in the party. We had that serious conversation. Not everyone in that room agreed with where we stood, but I'm glad to say that through the conversation, through many conferences, that has taken a step forward year on year. Even just at not our last conference, the conference before in November, we obviously recognise an LGBT group and part of our conference, and they're now part of our they're now part of the party. They have a place in our executive. They give them the same equality as everyone else. At the end of the day, it's having the conversation. We've moved that from having maybe 4 or 5 missing to now having only 13 out of 14. That takes time. You know, we're never going to bully people into accepting it. That conversation was won in the South. It's proven, so it has been. And I'm quite proud of my party that gives people the choice to obviously look at it and continue. You know, it's the same with my mum and dad. It took them time. You'll never bully anyone into it. So even on a conversation on the doorstep with an old lady a few weeks ago, we raised the conversation of equal marriage, and I thought, here we go, this woman's going to just start on me here. And we started to have the conversation about it, and you know what she said? Bless them. It's not their fault, that's how God created them. Let's just let them have marriage. You know, we'll have the conversation and bring people over.
Michael, Sinn Féin do have a whip in this issue, but I mean, anecdotally, there is suggestions that some of the party members wouldn't necessarily vote for if given the choice on terms of conscience. Do you think a party should have a whip on this, or they should allow it as a conscience vote?
Well, I think there's two things. That's the first time I've heard that, have to be honest. And in the 16 years that I've been a member of the party, I've never encountered anyone who has shared that view with me, so I would fundamentally disagree with that. In terms of the whip, we are a democratic party. We take a decision at the Ardèche. Our members vote on that, and we do that every year. And the party voted unanimously in support of marriage equality. So, you know, when the members of the party take a decision, then the elected rep should follow through. And no disrespect to Conor, but you know, I think there is genuine frustration in the LGBT conversation. Personally speaking, I get very frustrated at the idea of having polite conversations over whether or not I am entitled to the exact same rights as a straight person. And I'm sure there are other people in the room who feel that frustration as well. You know, so this idea of a journey, I'm not too sure about. You know, I mean, the Green Party are 100% on this issue. Sinn Féin are 100% on this issue. And I struggle with the concept that other progressives can't get people into the room to a vote. And you alluded to some of the ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous excuses that were given for SDLP MLAs missing the vote. We have a candidate standing in South Down, Sinead Bradley, who took pen to paper 2 years ago and described marriage equality as God-defying acts. To me, that's not progressive politics.
And we've had the conversation with Sinead, and Sinead's now on board with us. You know, it takes time. You know, I'm under the illusion, you know, I'm willing to respect people and their opinions. People have a difference out there. It takes time. I'm glad to have the conversations. I'm still having conversations within people within our party, and I'll never shy away from that. Other parties have their opinions. We are who we are, and I'm very proud as a party who we are, and I'll let people continue to evolve.
Sophie, your party's obviously on board with same-sex marriage, but how difficult is it? I mean, traditionally the sort of brand of loyalism that you come from would have been seen as very male, very misogynist, very traditional. How difficult was it for to bring those older members along with that?
It was difficult enough. So in some areas, some of the party they felt that it was a risky decision to take at the time, right before an election, so late 2013, before the council elections. That same group asked me to stand in Upper Bank because they'd spent some time kind of developing their ideas, and they'd said, look, this is the way forward for unionism, an outward-looking unionism that respects everybody. If we continue to be insular and try to keep this about, you know, white, straight Protestant men, and we're not going to get anywhere. We're going to be left on our own. Now that might be a strategic or pragmatic decision as opposed to one based on kind of moral respect for people as equals, but they have come along. The other group I'd find who would kind of have softened their views would be people who would have direct experience of LGBT relatives. So people find it a lot more easy to be tolerant when they've seen someone go through a hard time themselves. And that is, I don't know, I have issues with that. I mean, if you have to see someone go through a lot of pain in order to then decide that they can have the same rights as you, there are problems there. However, you can be pragmatic about it and say, it is what it is, and we're going to get to it how we're going to get to it. So yes, there are some super masculine prods still about, but we're getting there.
Rodney, your party leader, obviously at the party conference, made that, quite well quoted statement about being on the wrong side of history. I mean, you had said just as you come in tonight, you were just in from a canvass. For the sort of traditional unionists, how much of an issue is same-sex marriage, and does it come up when you're on the doorsteps?
It does come up on the doorsteps and quite frequently as an issue. In fact, I would say that in the current canvass, it's as prominent as an issue as EU referendum and obviously the issue of abortion. And those are the three most prominent issues, I think, that are coming up on the doorstep at this election. And part of the reason for that is that the other policy agendas and issues that do come up at elections haven't featured significantly as well. But those three issues are, with media attention, coming up as significant issues on the doorstep. It's well known that it's an issue of conscience in my party, and therefore would be a free vote in the next assembly. But I am pleased that at least a third at the last count of our candidates at this election, including myself, would support equal marriage in the next assembly. So whilst it's fine for discussions to take place about conversations, journeys, and things like that, and whilst it's fine when people collectively have ended up at an end point in a journey to criticise others who are still on that journey, it's important that things move to a free vote to allow people to take different views and ultimately to win the argument. And I think that that's something that is happening. Yeah. And I think the more politicians hear on the doorstep the importance of the issue, maybe the more reflection they may give to positions that they've previously adopted.
Malachy, do you want to just say just very briefly?
Yeah, I don't think we should get bogged down too much in marriage. It's not the only issue, and it's not necessarily the most pressing issue for our community when we think about suicide, sexual health, drugs and alcohol, etc. But in terms of marriage, I think there's a couple of important things to say. First of all, the Green Party brought the first motion in 2011. I challenged Sinn Féin in 2012 at Pride Talks Back. Don't just tell us that you support equality, do something. And a few months later, quite rightly, Sinn Féin and Anna Lowe of the Alliance Party supported Stephen's motion, and the first marriage motion was debated in October 12. Now, I will take some exception. I give credence
just
to
taking credit
the
party's policy.
Well, they followed us. I mean, the Greens lead the change. We talked about the environment 30 years ago. Now everybody talks about the environment. So we're glad that people are following us. But so we brought the first marriage motion. Now, I understand that for the Ulster Union it's an issue of conscience. For the SDLP and self-styled Party of Civil Rights and Equality, this is an equality issue, and unfortunately they still haven't got all of their MLAs over the line after 5 attempts. In terms of the Alliance Party, we had the party had a consultation led by Naomi Long for a period of 2 months where she engaged across the entire party, and there was a resolution from the executive that was now party policy. Lo and behold, the first 5 marriage votes, the Alliance Party have not followed their own party policy. And I would take exception to the idea that we must persuade people to equality. If a founding and core principle of our party is equality, then we shouldn't need to dither around whether or not we use the whip to get people over the line to support marriage. We squandered a lot of opportunities. In 2012, if SDLP and Alliance had had their house in order, we would have achieved a majority the first time. We only lost by 5. And that's because they were stuck in the lift or in the toilet or voting against party policy. But if we had scored that, we could have persuaded the Secretary of State to extend marriage across the UK like they did with civil partnership. Remember that the marriage bill didn't pass in the rest of the UK until 2014. We missed a window of opportunity because some parties who profess to be progressive couldn't get all their members across the line.
Can I just point out, over in the corner we have freelance journalist Amanda Ferguson and the lovely Brendan Hughes, who works with me, and I think do one of you want to ask a question at this point?
Well, I think I'm also interested in the idea of a free vote over this issue. Some people have talked about the need for parties to take a firm stance in this issue, whereas for the UP it is a free vote. But I was wondering, do you feel that there is a danger that by forcing MLAs to vote a certain way on this issue, which is sensitive for a lot of people, might get you over the line, but in the long run it will damage, I suppose, respect and understanding and acceptance of the gay community by doing this?
No. And let's be quite simple. If we replace sexual orientation or gender identity equality with race or religion, we would have no qualms about being so adamant. So why is there a hierarchy of inequality where it's okay to be a bit ambivalent on LGBT equality? I don't think it's fair. That's why I joined a political party that has equality at the core of its founding principles. So I think, and also there's a really dangerous false narrative being developed that LGBT people are bullied. Come back to me when you've seen or read statistics about bullying, self-harm, suicide, health inequalities that our community experience. Then we can have a frank conversation about who's being bullied and who's not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, completely agree with everything Malachy said. The other thing I'd say is that we're meant to be political leaders. We are elected, if we are elected, we're meant to be in a position to look after all of the people that we represent. That's not just one or two sections. The fact is discrimination still exists in the north of Ireland. That should not be happening. So I go back to this point. I don't understand where so-called progressives can negate away from those core points. So I think it is important that parties take a position on this issue and they vote en masse on an equality issue.
Yeah, I actually have two online submitted questions here that I'm going to run into one because they're both health related. Now, unfortunately, obviously, we don't have the DUP here, who have the health ministry at present. But it's in a present, obviously, same-sex couples cannot meet the criteria to access NHS-funded fertility treatment in Northern Ireland. What will the candidates do to address the unfair way assessment treatment is carried out? And also, we'll sort of run this in relation to a health question, is that what will the panellists do to lift the gay blood ban? And that's actually been submitted by a gay member of the Ulster Unionist Party. So, Rodney, we'll maybe start with you at the bottom there. Well,
we want the same reduction in restriction so that we have a consistent position with the rest of the UK. That's our party position, and that's a position that's supported by all and would be all successful candidates in the next assembly. Obviously, this is an issue where we have a minister during the previous mandate who frustrated change and expended time and public funds in court cases that he was ultimately unsuccessful on, and a lot will depend on who ends up ultimately as responsible for that portfolio post the election and post the discussions on the programme for government, and of course post the hunt. But our party position is quite clear on
that. Michael, do you want to?
Yeah, I think there are a range of issues in terms of mental health, in terms of fertility treatments, which lesbian, bisexual women cannot access on the same basis as a straight couple would. In terms of the blood ban, it needs to be done away with. Edwin Poots spent £80,000 of public money on that. That's not based on any rationale. That is based on his, in my view, quite bigoted religious sort of interpretation. The fact is there's a shortage of blood in the north of Ireland. We receive a large amount of blood from the likes of England, Scotland and Wales, where you do not have that ban, which again goes back to the indication that his thinking behind this is not based on science. You have other issues in terms of alcohol and drug addiction in the LGBT community. Suicide and self-harm, again, is another massive issue. And all of this is happening in a current climate where you have a DUP minister. So I think it's important that whoever takes on health in the next mandate prioritises LGBT health. So there's work to be done.
Sophie, obviously if the PUP managed to get an MLA elected, there would be a minority in the government, and it's questionable as to what sort of pressure they would be able to put on. Do you think that they would be able to put pressure on to have this sort of inequality in healthcare lifted?
Yeah, so in Belfast City Council, for example, we would vote quite often with the Greens, People for Profit, Sinn Féin, and sometimes SDLP. So we'd be quite content to form coalitions with other parties in order to achieve those objectives, because these aren't green or orange issues, and we're quite content the union is safe, so we will legislate on that basis.
Yeah, Amanda, do you want to ask a question at this stage? Shout.
Okay?
You're really loud anyway.
Okay. I'm just wondering, mental health is obviously a big issue for everybody in Northern Ireland, the North, whatever way you want to describe it. And obviously there's high levels of bullying in schools, self-harm, depression and anxiety issues among young LGBT people. I'm just wondering, to the gay candidates on the panel, do you feel standing is sort of helping to increase profile and so that other young people can see that you're proud of yourselves and that you're putting yourself forward, and also what are your parties actually going to do to help people around mental health issues?
Malachy, do you want to?
Yeah, so I think visibility is a hugely important issue for our community. Just the fact that we're having this discussion today, it seems unimaginable 5 years at the last Assembly elections. It's fantastic that there's so many LGBT candidates. I'm really looking forward to eventually a DUP one at some stage, so that would be great. But in terms of mental health, I'd be really wary of listening to platitudes from the 5 executive parties, or 4. It depends what the Ulster Unions are going to do. But the executive parties about mental health and suicide, our suicide prevention strategy expired last year. So, you know, and in terms of the LGBT community, we are hugely disproportionately impacted by poorer levels of mental health, suicide, self-harm, and the interconnecting issues around substance use and misuse. And that's exacerbated amongst the most vulnerable communities in our larger LGBT community. So if you look at the rates specifically amongst trans individuals, it's a lot worse. If you look around bi and visibility and issues for bi people, it can be a lot worse. And there are differentials in terms of how it impacts on the community. So for men, it might be attempts at suicide. For women, it might be around self-harm. So I think we need to, in a new mental health and suicide strategy, LGBT and T communities must be prioritised. We're not just looking at communities of geographic communities, rightly so, in areas of deprivation, there's a disproportionate impact, but we must not exclusively look at geographic communities. We also need to look at communities of interest, and they're disparate and they live everywhere. And because of societal homophobia, transphobia and sexism, we experience poorer mental health outcomes. The World Health Organization in 2014 said that the removal of discrimination, societal institutional discrimination and prejudice against LGBT people is key to ameliorating our mental health outcomes. That's the challenge to the DUP. If you are serious about addressing suicide, then you must stop discriminating against LGBT people.
Chris.
Okay, well, yes, I mean, I would agree with what Malachy says there about prioritised mental health, certainly for the LGBT community. In terms of the blood ban, it is completely irrational. Alliance is completely opposed to it. We believe that everybody should be given blood. It saves people's lives. It shouldn't matter. As Michael said as well, we get it from across the water as well, where there is no blood ban. So Alliance as well, we would be looking a wee bit further in terms of mental health issues. Where would they begin? A lot of the time it can begin sort of in schools and places like that. We've taken a stand against, for example, homophobic bullying. Trevor London Assembly as well. All of that comes together, but absolutely we would agree, prioritise mental health and get rid of the blood ban.
Obviously I'm conscious that the DUP aren't here and there's a lot of talk of the DUP. We have a question submitted by a DUP voter who is not yet out and has also not attended. But what they say, and I think this is quite interesting, as someone who has voted for the DUP and believes in the vast majority of their pledges, that he sometimes feels ostracised and isolated by gay organisations. Do you think that there is a place within the gay community for DUP supporters and voters? Do you want to pick up on that? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. I mean, sexuality and gender identity is not exclusive to who you vote for or what sort of, grouping you come from. Everybody has someone within their family or network of friends or, someone they work with who is gay. So absolutely, it's welcome and open to all.
Yeah, I think without doubt, there is members in the DUP who are gay, and there's plenty of them. I I know one of them. That's for their choice.
I know several.
We probably know several of them, so we do. There could be some sitting amongst us here. I don't want to
I'm just
stand
conscious
up.
of the libelous questions that Sean didn't send me that were submitted online, so could we be careful as we're proceeding here?
But at the end of the day, regardless of where they belong to, there's a home for people. If they feel that's where they're comfortable, let them be comfortable there. They maybe are best placed to be in that organisation and that political party because they can maybe start that conversation in their party slowly but surely. And going back to the mental health side of things, we have to look at the whole mental health. 1 in 4 of us suffer mental health issues, just not LGBT community. So we need to look at the whole wider concept. That's why, for instance, we'll be calling for a full regional review of mental health service because it's fragmented. It's fragmented, especially for rural areas, LGBT community. We need to bring the whole thing together and look at it. And going back to the blood ban again, I think we already did what everyone else is saying here. I've had the personal experience. I went to Blood Donation Centre, looked at it, got refused. It wasn't there to create some sort of hype. It was to draw attention to the fact that we're still being discriminated in this day and age. And I'm glad to say it was well received by local people. In Ballymena, of all places, over 14,000 people interacted in an online conversation, and we definitely stirred up the DUP anyway, but that's up for that.
I'm aware the time's ticking on. Do we have any audience questions at this stage? Go ahead. You can take their microphone if you want. Oh.
I just want to make 2 points. The first one is that, it's very well for all of you to say, let's, bring in marriage equality, let's do this. But in reality, if it's brought forward, we're going to have the petition of concern again. So what are any of you actually going to propose in a real way to overturn that? Because we can say all we want that we want to bring in marriage equality. We already have a majority of Assembly members. What are we actually going to do to make it happen the next time it goes forward? Yeah. The second issue is about a woman's right to choose. Because I think that it's very strange to have people on the platform champion, human rights and civil rights when they will not stand up on an issue as important as full civil rights and reproductive rights for women. So what are any of you going to do about that? And that actually is in line. It's in line with an online question where somebody had said, what more could we do to bring about marriage equality in this jurisdiction? People don't want to be sitting around waiting on the courts. Petitions don't work. They're not taking notice of opinion polls. So as people who are hopefully going to be, are trying to be elected in this election, what are you going to do to help progress that? Do you want to start with Rodney at the bottom and work our way up?
Yeah, it's very clear from the last mandate that the mechanism of a petition of concern, which was the rationale behind it, was that the petition of concern was there to be used to prevent discrimination, that it turns out to be deployed in the way that it has been, and most people are coming round to the view, and I think this is a debate and a discussion that will take place over the next period of time as to what alternatives there are to a petition of concern, whether it be a weighted majority or some other mechanism, so that it isn't used in the way that it has been during the last mandate, and not just the responsibility of one party in terms of how these things have been used. I think there needs to be a proper discussion about how we change that, and a weighted majority may well be one option, but there are other legal and constitutional options that we could look at. It's clear that it's now being used in a way that it was never intended to have been used. If I can just deal with, I didn't deal with mental health and well-being, but obviously it's something that my party's focused on in some detail over the past months. And we've released a paper on it. It's a central issue that we've been promoting through my party leader in general, but also more specific in education. We're looking to improve sex and relationship education where there's no current duty to provide. There's only guidance given by the Department of Education for those who seek to provide or are willing to provide. That's something we'd like to see progress made on, as well as encouraging and better educating teachers and school staff that they can identify bullying at a much younger age, and so that they're better aware, because what we have is staff who maybe are tuned into a particular type of bullying, whether it be to do with race or religion, but less so when it comes to homophobic or transphobic bullying. So there's a job to do within the education system, and that's again something which we're quite focused on, and we'd like to see progress made on.
Sophie, people are obviously understandably frustrated. You know, we're waiting on change. It's the pace of it is grindingly slow. I mean, as citizens, what do you think more can be done to try and push the politicians who are in place on?
We could have a people's revolution, like a force change. As citizens, we could have a referendum, but again, there's issues with that. Why should everybody get to decide whether or not I have the same rights as other people? Okay, so you know, Jeff Dudgeon had to go to the European Court of Human Rights, right? He had to transcend his own government in order to get homosexuality decriminalised. Petition of concern has been abused. You know, it's been used to stop sports clubs getting reduced rates, and it was never. It hasn't been used for its intended purpose. So I think 18 years post Good Friday Agreement, we are possibly in a position to do away with that, and indeed with mandatory coalition. So, in terms of what we can do, we can continue to agitate, or I really do think the best route is going to be through the courts, because the current legislature isn't going to give us our rights.
Have we any other audience questions? Yep, sorry, go ahead. Oh, I'll come to you in a second. So go ahead.
My name is Jeff Dewey. I have just formed a new party, and I'm standing in North Belfast as a candidate. It's Northern Ireland First. We openly support the same-sex marriage and find it ridiculous that it should even go to debate. It should be a basic human right. But my question is, considering our politicians have recently got together to outlaw and create a draconian law saying it is illegal to pay for sex, this targets men. But it also, if you think about it, traditionally undermines the marriage situation, which was traditionally the woman stayed at home and have babies while the husband worked. So if they can make such ridiculous laws, what hope has the community here got, really?
Yeah, sorry, just before we go down, so do you want to ask a question? Can we get a microphone over here?
He doesn't need a microphone.
No, he's loud enough. I actually think he's following me. I've seen him nearly every day this week.
If your local candidate isn't on the platform here, go to www.loveequalityni.org and you can email all your local candidates and find out where they stand on the issue of marriage equality. What I wanted to say was I really struggle with this term conscience. How is equal marriage and choice any more of a conscience issue than, let's say, welfare reform? Let's say leaving the EU, let's say the environment. How are these not conscience issues as well? Someone earlier talked about let's calling a spade a spade. To address a problem, the only way to deal with it is to be clear on what it is. What we're talking about is people's faith and personal religious position. We're not talking about issues of conscience. And I would say that to the Alliance, to the SDLP and to the Ulster Unionists. Be clear about what it is that you're talking about. If we allow people a free vote on the issue of conscience, then what's the point in even having political parties?
Yeah, here. Alison, can I just add, in terms of what can we do, just as a point of note, every single movement towards LGBT and or T equality has come through the courts or a Labour Secretary of State. The parties on the Hill, despite their protestations in favour of equality, have never actually brought forward any significant change in terms of equality. So let's hope the next mandate's very different, and you have that opportunity by.
We have had the petition concerned.
Well,
so
I think what we can do is
attack parties for they're voting in favour of change, but they're being blocked. So obviously, as Rodney said, it's.
But I think what we can do is ensure that the DUP are below a petition of concern. And we need to reform and review the DUP. So when you're going out, if LGBT equality is a huge motivator from you, look across your candidates, use your preferences, work right down the list, and just exclude those who are opposed to equality. That's the way to ensure that that party is below the petition of concern or the 30 members required to activate it.
And I think when we all watched it, with great joy, is the South, a place that we never thought it was wedded to the church at one point, vote in favour of a referendum. So I think it's a good time sort of ask all the candidates, maybe start with you. Do you think a referendum is the way forward, or is Northern Ireland too small a place for a referendum to work in the same way as it did in the Republic?
I'm completely against a referendum for a number of reasons. First of all, the way referendum work in Northern Ireland it wouldn't matter anyway. I mean, it wouldn't be a binding referendum. I think I think there's a very good chance it would fail as well, because you'd have probably the reason I say that is because you would have the largest party in the jurisdiction would probably throw every penny they have at it. I would hope that it wouldn't fail, but you never know in these things either. Just a personal story. I actually canvassed in the south along with Fine Gael for the yes vote in the referendum, and I was actually physically threatened by somebody who was going to break every bone in my body. And this was in Artane. It was quite a sort of leafy part of Dublin. It wasn't a sort of rough area. That's the sort of thing that people would be coming up against if they were trying to campaign a referendum here as well.
Malachy, would you be in favour of a referendum?
No, absolutely not. And emphatically no, for lots of reasons. Chris mentioned it, Sophie mentioned it earlier. I don't want to have to ask every single person across the north for my rights. This should just be mine. Secondly, it would do huge damage to vulnerable LGBT people. Did you see some of the hate that came out in the south? Imagine vulnerable kids at 12, 13, 14 in rural areas in the north experiencing that type of hate and discourse in their local communities, in their schools, in their youth clubs and in their families. No, no, no to a referendum. I think we're going to win either by court or we get the DUP below a petition of concern and we get a big rainbow unicorn and trample through them and get a majority.
Sophie, what are you in favour of a referendum or?
No, not a referendum on this. I am in favour of more participatory democracy, so allowing people to legislate. I think all the kind of public polls and surveys on choice and marriage equality have shown that people are ahead of politicians. So if we could put in place mechanisms for people to take part in writing policy, we would have more progressive policy, and it would also kind of reform the disconnect people feel with political institutions because they would be part of them more. So that would be my solution.
I think it goes back to a full review of the petition of concern. I think we need to look at, we voted for devolution for the right reasons. It is here for us to make decisions, and it should be made in the Assembly. We had a majority in the last one, which our party leader Colin Meakswood proposed. It was a good day to have that there. It's very clear our government can make the decisions. We need to look at the mechanisms, which is prohibiting that there. And I think we go back, we look at the petition of concern. We can actually have an Assembly who will pass the legislation. I think that's an even prouder moment that our government can actually stand up for its citizens.
Yeah. Michael?
In terms of a petition of concern, I share your frustrations, but just to note, it was Katrina Rann who on TV announced that the conscience clause was going to be blocked by a petition of concern, so that was how it should be properly used in terms of protecting people's rights. In terms of the referendum, no, I'm not in favour of a referendum.
Sure, Michael?
Absolutely.
Did you give Martine
as a
Democratic
Party,
no haggling.
As a Democratic Party, we had a discussion on this here, and the conclusion from Sinn Féin is that we're not in favour of a referendum. In terms of the point about the referendum down south, I'm actually shocked by that because we campaigned vigorously after the Westminster election in the south on behalf of Sinn Féin campaign for a yes campaign, and Richie, my partner, we were in now working class areas, I have to say, and the response was absolutely phenomenal. I have never encountered a more positive campaign that I have, so I am quite shocked by that.
Maybe it's just people didn't like Fine Gael, I don't know.
Are you?
Well, I would share that as well.
Rodney, in terms of referendum, where does your party stand?
I think the arguments of why there shouldn't be a referendum have already been well made and well understood, and it has to be a positive decision that's taken by the Assembly, and that's what I think we all look forward to in the next mandate.
Yeah. What about a show of hands? Who would be in favour of a referendum, or or does everybody think that a referendum is the wrong way to go? Can we have a show of hands in favour? We've got 2 people. And in relation to audience questions, would somebody maybe like to, do you want to?
I just wanted to ask a question, talking about the marriage equality, there's other LGBT issues, and especially trans rights, seriously underfunded across the board. I would like to know party stance, party plans, and how we bring more money, acknowledgement to trans healthcare, trans mental health care, trans organisations, that's that one really.
Yeah, and we'll have an online question that's of a very similar vein that's saying, what if anything are you planning to do to change the current gender recognition process for trans and non-binary people, and would you push for legal recognition of non-binary people, and if so, how so?
Well, I think the gender recognition. Thank you. The gender recognition bill in the South, I think, was a good example of something that we could do there. Alliance are in favour of a transgender strategy to address the specific needs that transgender people have. In terms of what exactly that would comprise, it would take consultation with people. We're not just going to be prescriptive and say, here's what we think it should be. We'll listen to people and then we'll decide then.
Yeah, Sophie?
Yeah, so we don't have policy on this, so I'm going to give my views and hope that nobody in the party disagrees with me. My argument would be trans people are some of the most marginalised, like absolutely the most marginalised in society. Even in terms of like finding bars to go to, right, or places to have dinner with friends. So my argument is everybody has the right to self-identify, and if you need additional support in order to self-identify positively and to receive the positive feedback you need, then the state should provide that for you. So that would be the argument that I'd make to the party if we were going to develop policy.
It comes down to being who you are. If you want to be who you are, you shouldn't be discriminated against. You should have the opportunity to be who you want to be. It's obviously the responsibility of the Assembly to make sure we deliver the appropriate care and money where it's directed. It comes back to providing the appropriate money through mental health services. It goes back to the basics, it's providing the money where it's required. Again, it comes back to let's provide it for everybody, so make the right funding to health, so we're just not discriminating against one section only.
Okay, we did actually start a bit late, so I think if we're happy enough, Sean, are you happy enough to conclude there? Do you think you want some more audience participation? Would you like it? I'd actually be interested in, at the back there, you'd said you'd be in favour of a referendum. Why would that be?
Yes, I think this falls off into the question first of all, I thank the LGBT community for having a public meeting as a member of the public. I don't have any axe to grind. That's the first thing. Following on from the question that the first member of the audience said, it's okay coming here and saying let's do this. It's okay coming here and saying let's do this and let's do that if the DUP are going to block a petition. The reason why I was interested to hear the panel's views is that if there is a referendum down south, and who would have thought that a conservative country like down south would have voted by 62%, I think, in a high turnout for same-sex marriage. If there was a referendum here, and let's say even if you want a bare majority, then personally I can't see the DUP even politically or morally trying to use a petition of concern. I think that would get them from their point of view off the hook. And I know legally they could block it, but politically they couldn't. So I'm a bit surprised, to be honest, the panel are quite dismissive of the idea. Because I think all you need is a majority in a bare referendum to argue that the people are on your side as a matter of fact. And then the petition of concern may not actually happen. Yeah. That's why I was raising it. I think it's an interesting point.
Can we get the microphone up here, please?
We don't have a constitution.
Yeah.
So a referendum is the only way to change the constitution. So that's why it worked. We don't have a constitution. So a referendum wouldn't actually mean anything. And the DUP would not have any problem because the majority of the Assembly has voted in favour. So that's already happened, and it had absolutely no impact on their misuse of a mechanism that was put in place 18 years ago, and their continued misuse of it.
And so you think it's the courts basically that are going to...
Sorry? Well,
Alison,
they don't care what the people want. You know what I mean?
So do you, obviously then you think it's a matter the courts are going to have to decide then and
like everything else, yeah, pretty much.
Can I go back to trans equality?
Yeah.
I think we talked enough about marriage. The marriage stuff's well worn. As a party, we've committed to trans equality. We've actually published a queer manifesto. So these are our commitments as a party for the next bold steps in terms of LGBT equality. We have committed as a party that we want to see the review of gender recognition, and that can be done in the north. You can look at the Argentinian model. I'm just going to read a couple of things about this. It's a simple administrative process. It represents best practice. It doesn't include a divorce requirement or the consent of the spouse. It doesn't require applicants to be sterile. or to have a mental health diagnosis, and it's available to people under the age of 18. So that's a best practice model that exists around the world. None of the European states are human rights compliant in terms of trans equality. We have an opportunity to go ahead, and the Greens will lead the change on this issue in the next mandate. For every Green that you elect across the north, we will bring this issue. So, and others will follow us.
Brendan, have you a question?
I just wanted to do a U-turn really on this. We haven't discussed gay cake, unfortunately. So what I want to know is, did the gay cake legal bid, was that a help or a hindrance to the LGBT community in terms of, I suppose, the long-term campaign for equality?
And also just
the cake was by, right?
Just a bit of a follow-up point,
Christy, do you think that that equality case, although I mean it was a case that was waiting to happen, but do you think that that was the right case to choose to test that legislation?
Thank you. As far it was the Equality Commission actually that brought the case. That's an independent body, so I'm not really going to say if it was the right case or whatever else. In terms of has it damaged the LGBT community, I don't think it has, but it has damaged sort of relations between the LGBT community and the Christian community, definitely. I mean, some of the arguments were very adversarial. If you looked on social media, it was basically just Christians and gay people having to go at each other. So from that point of view, I think it was very divisive. I think if there had been some kind of mediation, rather than it going to court, that would have been a better way to handle it. But if in answer to your question, if it has done damage, I don't think so.
Rodney, do you think in terms of when you're speaking to people who would maybe from a more traditional unionist background that they felt in that was in some way threatening or adversarial or whatever when it came to that case?
It certainly became a very sensitive issue in terms of being it was a prevalent issue on the doorsteps at the last election, not so at this election. But the great difficulty in court cases is it's ultimately judged by the result. And what I always find in practice is you could have the best day in court ever and the best arguments, but no one cared how good your arguments were or how well you performed because you were judged on the result. And I think the reflection on that particular case is largely now determined by the outcome and the decision on it. Yeah. And I think that's always the danger with litigation. And so when there are discussions around what other options there may have been, and there was a mention of mediation, it's always difficult to say whether that's appropriate or not. But yeah, I think when you go to court, you have to be prepared to win as well as lose, and those can always present difficulties post-event because people can feel vindicated in terms of decisions that have been made, irrespective of the basis on which the decision was formed. Yeah. People will then extend that to other arguments and justifications that might not have formed part of the actual reason and judgment in the first place.
Yeah, Michael, in terms of the case, I mean, it gained so much publicity and some of the comments were ludicrous, you know. I mean, the other sort of things it was compared to, you know, if I go in and ask for an ISIS kick, can I get one of those type things? Do you think that it became then almost trivialised what was a very serious issue?
I have to be honest, I didn't hear everything you said, so apologies if I misquote.
I mean, basically all he's saying is, do you think that the Aishers case damaged the cause of gay equality rather than forwarded it?
No, I don't. And I think you raised a point there in terms of this being trivialised. I think there was a purposeful campaign to try and trivialise this here. This was dangerous. This was so dangerous to our community. And I think that whole trivialisation came into it to try and sort of subtly get this under the radar. If this had went through, you would possibly have the case where any of us on this table, by yourself, sir, could have went in and been refused service. Like it's Alabama in the 1960s. There is no way any of us are going to sit on the back of the bus, so that's not going to happen. In terms of just this point of Christian versus, you know, the LGBT or the LGBT community, that's too simplistic. I mean, I'm a Christian, you're a Christian. There are many people within the community who are gay, lesbian, bisexual and transgender who are Christians as well, maybe not. So this idea where, you know, a handful of individuals, normally led by the likes of Jim Allister, somehow have elected themselves to speak on behalf of the entire Christian community is crazy. But in terms, going back to the original point, it was a dangerous precedent, could have been set had this been passed. We're not second-class citizens. We're not going back to the days of criminalisation under no circumstances. And I think I can say with confidence of everybody on this table, will we ever allow that to happen?
Yeah.
Basically, just going back to the whole thing of quality, it's about goods and services. It had to be the case. It had to be tested. It had to be proven we were not going to be treated as second-class citizens, as has been said. We had to make the point and prove that we will be treated equally, we'll be allowed the same goods and services, and we can ask for whatever message we want and not be discriminated. As we said before, I'm a Christian. I'm very happy to be a Christian. I don't think it damaged any relations. To me, it actually let a lot of Christians have a bit more compassion and understanding and realise, we can't discriminate against people. I think it was a lot of media attention drew to it. It was hyped up a wee bit, but I think a lot of Christians out there understand, and from my point of view, from the Christians I know, they were quite happy with the case and the outcome.
Sophie, from as a lawyer's point of view, do you find that a lot of these issues, for some reason, when they get portrayed in the media, they become sort of almost like a green and orange issue, where it is automatically assumed that unionists are on one side of the fence and nationalists on the other side? Obviously, you would say that's a grey area. I mean, how people like yourselves who come from that unionist community, how did you feel that played out?
The Irish cake
Yeah.
issue? Well, we're a secular party, so it wasn't really as difficult for us. So we would just argue there's a separation between church and state, and therefore one small group can't decide for everybody else what they're able to do. So it was fairly straightforward. However, we do respect the rights of religious groups to be free from what they might feel is kind of forced respect or forced decisions. So people shouldn't be forced into doing anything, but if they operate within the public sphere, then they can't discriminate against any other group. So it was fairly straightforward for us, but it might be harder for other parties who do have a religious membership.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting to look at some of the background of the organisations involved in the Asher's Cake. You'll see that the Christian Institute, and I use that in very loose terms because they profess to speak on behalf of all Christians. You look at their previous attempts to unpick good facilities and services legislation. They tried it with a famous case around the B&B owners, Hazel and Rosemary Bull, I think, in southern England. They tried it with Lilia Liddell around wearing a cross in a workplace. They tried it around a register in England who was refusing to carry out civil partnerships, even though it's in her job description. So these are people who are trying to unpick as best as possible LGBT equality and roll it back. It's interesting that the Attorney General made an intervention. The Attorney General is quite fond of interventions, if you notice his pattern of behaviour. He's done quite a lot, and I'm curious why a progressive party would ever extend his mandate. Michael, why he's rolled forward another 3 years when we've seen him intervene in the abortion case, we've seen him intervene on an adoption case, which it wasn't his purview to do. He tried to intervene in an Austrian adoption case in order to preempt the outcome of our adoption, same-sex adoption case here in the north. He's interfered on the Asher's case. He's interfered on Justice Horner's ruling around abortion. And I suppose there's an expectation that he'll also intervene in the 2 marriage cases that are upcoming. So this is a guy who seems to be doing quite a lot. And if you look at the Christian Institute and what they're doing in terms of trying to roll back LGBT equality, you can see who the cynical manipulators of the Ashes case are. It's not queer space. It's not somebody wanting a cake. It's the institution behind this.
Yeah, the question at the back of the room there. While the microphone's gone down, obviously as a working journalist who wants to stay employed, I'm distinguishing myself from any defamation of the Attorney General. Sorry, go to you in a minute. Yeah.
Hiya.
Go ahead, do you want to ask a question at the back of the room, the purple?
Oh, sorry. Back.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Right. Okay, so there's been a general kind of, there's been talking about the Ashes case and so on, and I would say this question kind of is an extension of that. A couple of the people on the panel have suggested that they want to win a debate or a conversation, and a couple of people are just in favour of whipping them and locking up the lifts to make sure that they don't kind of get out of the vote, right? So the first thing I would ask is, you have a community of people that for the most part consider LGBT, whichever group you belong to be the other. We're effectively a mortal enemy, immoral at worst, perhaps just misunderstood at best, right? They get their morals from Leviticus, and they believe in a literal version of the Bible or something similar. So my question to the people who claim to want to have a conversation is, imagine you're stood on the doorstep of a career DUP or extreme conservative right-wing voter. How do you convince them
without using the word equality, because let's face it, if the word equality was enough, they would already believe in it. How do you convince them to actually look at our situation and go, yes, they deserve marriage equality? And the second thing I would like to ask is, I might be alone in this room, but I don't particularly enjoy the accumulation of LGBT into kind of this amorphous blob. We are individual communities. The lesbian and gay communities are very different from the bisexual community, which is very different from the means of the trans community. So particularly with what I like to call the silent B, and I would say the marginalised T, we've already heard a little about the transsexual and transgender community. What do your party specifically have in mind for the bisexual community, particularly with visibility and other issues similar to it?
I'm just going to take another question, then we'll let them answer both at the same time, just at the back of the room there.
I just wanted to point out on the question of marriage equality, this issue also affects the transgender community in a huge way, because my husband and I, we're a transgender couple, and the law and the state don't actually recognise our marriage. The only people that recognise our marriage is a non-subscribing Presbyterian Church of Ireland who married us. We had to have a blessing. We can't have a civil partnership. We can't have a legal marriage. A transgender person can't change their gender designation if they're married without their partner's, their spouse's consent. So there's a huge question with marriage equality issues with the transgender community also.
Yeah, Christian, go ahead.
Well, yes, if I could just take the point that the gentleman raised, first of all, about the LGBT communities all being separate. You are absolutely right, I do take the point. I think, though, it is better to try and fight for equality together rather than to sort of divide ourselves up. A lot of the mental health issues, a lot of the issues of isolation are faced by LGBT and T people in the same ways. Really, everybody's lived experience is different, but I think we should all be grouping together and we should be fighting for equality together rather than dividing each other up. In response to what the lady said about marriage equality, absolutely, it needs to refer to the transgender
I think
community
obviously
as well.
what she was saying is, even if the same-sex marriage should go through tomorrow, there would still be an absence of rights there for people from the trans community.
Well, that absolutely should be considered as well, and we would absolutely take that on board.
Yeah, do you want to go?
Yeah, that's the case of going back to the lady at the back there. Without a doubt, we have to make sure everyone is included when it comes to the marriage equality bill. We need to make sure you have the same rights as we have, so we're all one at this here at the end of the day. Going back to conversations, how we win the conversation, would you have ever thought a number of years ago the conversation would have won in the Republic down south? No. Everyone thought it was a church state, it was run by Catholic Church. That it takes change. It took conversations, it took people talking at the tables, having the conversation. On the doorsteps, a wee bit harder to try and convince folk. It takes people within families, friends. That's the way you persuade it. It takes the conversation throughout time. But again, over time, it takes that whole thing. I'm never going to force anyone. A man the other night decided to start quoting Bible quotations at me and using the Old Testament. I very quickly said to me, I'm actually mentioned 14 times as a sinner, being left-handed, more than I am with being gay. So I said, well, we're going to start quoting Bible stuff. You need to go back and read your Bible. And he says to me, I've never read that once. Well, I says, obviously you've never read it properly.
Carol, you got a question?
No, I mean, Marky's point about the AG, you need to be careful just about that.
Yeah, I'm going to stand outside while he's discussing it. I'll come back in when it's done.
There's nothing defamatory so far. Keep going, Malachi.
Just noted the
Can we? Yeah,
Thank
let's just point that he's on his own.
Thank you, but there have been lots of families who've got access to justice by inquests and things like that, and I appreciate, there are times where some of the public figures just lack a bit of compassion at times. When you see interventions, it's a bit hard to understand. But one thing I think would be really helpful, particularly for younger people coming, because we've been talking to lots of groups of young people as part of this election, which is great. But one thing they did say, which I found very interesting, it would be good, irrespective of where people are politically, if there was some sort of charter around campaigning rights that everybody could sign up to, because they don't want, no one wants to be aligned to a political party if they're lacking in confidence and their self-esteem issues. So it's almost like a manifesto or a charter. And I think that's something, even just from listening tonight, is quite possible. There might be variations, and certainly there may be differences where people are politically, but if there was an opportunity to almost coming out of this to provide some sort of charter, I think it would be really helpful, particularly for young people who, you know, are not only lacking the opportunity to talk, particularly in schools and the rest, but just to let them know that there are others, as we've all done as campaigners and as activists, make it easier for people coming behind us. And that's a big thing, particularly for trans, because the stuff that Sophie says is right. They're the most marginalised group in our society. And I think if anything coming out of this election, get into the next one, it'd be really good if we could do something around that. So if any of us are elected, you know, when the hustings are over, I think we're all open to coming back to see what we can do.
And Carol, the petition of concern, we know it has been abused multiple occasions. Would you be in favour now of removing it and changing it, replacing that with some better mechanism?
The petition of concern is there as an equality protection.
Yeah, and it hasn't worked. So I mean,
well, it hasn't worked for some. I mean, I know as an Irish language activist that most unionists have actually said that they felt, just that the way Rodney articulated, that's not the way the petition of concern was meant to be, and it should be there. And I also have a wee bit of a struggle around people talking about potential amendments or other alternatives to a petition of concern when they haven't really put forward any. So maybe when the heat comes out of the election, we can start looking at how we can protect people.
And you think would Sinn Féin be in favour of re-looking at that legislation, maybe changing the rules?
We're certainly not in favour of anything that's going to dilute the protection around equality. Absolutely not. So, and that's something we've been very, very consistent on. But any issue in relation to equality or promotion of equality, I just think the way in which the mechanisms have been abused has been quite disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. And if people are genuine outside of hustings and after elections are over about improving those protections, then even let's just see what they look like. Let's put stuff down and let's see what it looks like. But until that happens, I would maintain that the petition of concern needs to be there to protect people, even though we can't stop others abusing it.
Yeah. Amanda?
Yes, I was just sort of reflecting that there can be quite sort of hysterical reactions to LGBT issues, and that's reflected in the media coverage. And I'm just wondering what the panel think about how the media in the north, in Northern Ireland, how the LGBT community feel it's reflected within the media, perhaps what we do well, what we could do better, and also what are the stories that we're missing because we're focusing on gay cakes and court battles and those sort of things.
Amanda's a freelance journalist who sometimes freelances in the Belfast Telegraph and said nothing more, but just moving on. What in relation to the media, I mean, what role do you think that we can play in relation to pushing equality or reflecting all of the views without going into this sort of hysteria, as Amanda pointed out? Do you know?
I think positive visibility is probably the most important thing that the media can do. Because you rightly pointed out that any time an LGBT issue comes up, it's usually something with the kind of whirlwind that the Asher's Cake had. So positive possibility in terms of, you know, we are a vibrant community of communities, if you want to put it that way. And with that, you know, what's happened here tonight was unthinkable a number of years ago. So just going back to that very simple point, positive visibility.
I mean, from my point of view in the media, no matter where I go, people say you should reflect things in a positive manner. But I mean, as a journalist, you know, I'm not a PR person. It's not my job to do the PR for politicians. You just have plenty of press officers to do that for you. With engagement with the media, it's sometimes too, do you think that politicians could do more to present a positive engagement with the media rather than always treating them as if they're some sort of opposition or enemy? Do you want to answer?
Yeah, I think going back to the media and our relationship with them, you know, we need to work with the media because we obviously want to get our message out there. But you know, it's when you have certain people out there, like the Nolan Show, for instance. We're not going to pick on Nolan specifically, but whenever you try and put across positive stories And again, it doesn't matter if it's an LGBT case or it's something particular about a new piece of legislation you want to bring forward and you want to get on the radio and talk about it. The first thing you get, we want you to speak about flags. We want to speak about cakes. We want to speak to you about hate and not about love and compassion and the good things that's going on, the good things that's happening in society. The fact is we're sitting here and we're actually agreeing on things.
Yeah.
We agree on lots of things, and sometimes when it needs to be portrayed, everybody thinks the people on the hill are each other's throats. We aren't at each other's throats all the time, and it's time people have seen that, because all we get in the door is, you need to agree more, you need to agree more. We agree on a lot of things, maybe a bit more working together and things when it comes to the petitions of concern and how we want to stop that there. But I think it's the media sometimes has to get a better relationship with us and understand, yes, our press officers are there to put out a message. There's the paid element of staff, but I think a better relationship, sometimes let's break down the barriers, not let's look for the big stories that's going to get controversy.
Yeah, Sophie, I mean, we know that currently there's been a lot of talk about how loyalism has enjoyed a very bad relationship with the media in recent years. I mean, what do you think can be done to change that or repair that?
Actually part of my PhD research is like the fact that loyalism feels that it's badly portrayed. But the conclusion I've come to is that all the positive representations in the world won't matter if the structural stuff isn't sorted out. So I could ask you to write nice stories about lesbians or loyalists or both, and we would still feel on the edges of society. So those are the things that need to be tackled, as opposed to simply asking people to be nicer about you.
No, which would be patronising. I mean, if you were to start all of a sudden just writing lovely flowery stories for the sake of it, I mean, it's not going to help progress anybody's agenda, really, is it? I mean, it's a patronising way of looking at things. Obviously, there's equality on both sides, and we need to tell the true story. Do you think maybe that there's a room there for better engagement with the media?
I don't really know. In terms of the media sort of keeping the green and orange thing going, I think that very much still happens. I mean, every time there's every time there's any kind of disturbance, obviously you have to report that, but I think sometimes a wee bit too much is made of these are Republicans versus loyalists, and I think it just sometimes we need to kind of take a step back, and it could, as Michael said, it could be a bit more positive. We could reflect the positives. I'm not saying there's anything positive about riots or anything like that. I'm saying we could reflect the positives in society a bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as a party, I selling my party as much as possible tonight, but we nominated nine men and 9 women across the 18 constituencies. We have this radical idea that democracy and representative democracy should actually look like the society it purports to represent. That's just not limited to our political representation. That's also in terms of power, decision makers, the media, journalism, etc., creative industries and traditional industries. So we actually want to see the diversity that's similarly represented in this room reflected in those people who have power in society. I think in terms of LGBT issues in the media, there can be an element that's salacious or sensationalist around these issues. I kind of look forward to the day when it's a wee bit boring and humdrum, you know, when your trans couple or your lesbian couple are just sort of run of the mill and rather boring, and you know, it's not a story. We have a long way to go on that. I think we've seen better representation in the media in terms of some of the soaps and some of our dramas and some of our serial sort of plays, our serial dramas, etc. But we still have some work to do. There was some interesting stuff done by the BBC Trust a few years ago, and one of the things that we critiqued them on was the idea of balance. So this idea that if we talk about LGBT issues, we must get somebody on to balance. If someone's talking positively, we must balance them with somebody talking negatively. They've moved away from that skewed idea of balance. You know, we don't do Chinese New Year and then have on the mad racists saying, send them all home. So when we have a positive news story around LGBT issues, we don't necessarily need to balance that with people who are homophobes or transphobes.
Yeah, do we have any other? Yep, go ahead, can we get a microphone? Start here.
Okay, so I'm a young trans woman, and in the state of gender recognition law in the UK, including Northern Ireland at the moment, even if I had gender recognition, which I don't because the process to go through it is ridiculous, I would still be legally barred from applying for certain jobs, and I would probably still go to male prison. Which is my biggest fear in my life, and it's a fear that's shared by a lot of other trans and non-binary people. The question earlier on about gender recognition was brushed over, and I think it's something that always gets left with these conversations. Most parties don't seem to have policies on this, and if you don't, please take the time over the next year to develop that. But what are you specifically going to do? It might not be gender recognition, but what are you going to specifically do if you're elected to forward often the very bad experiences of the trans and non-binary people in this country?
I'm going to duck, because I mean, I tried to come back to the question, but I was quite clear about the manifesto commitment that the Green Party have given in terms of our queer manifesto around gender recognition review. I hope that other parties will follow us. There are significant issues around access to healthcare, GP prescribing, people being forced to be diagnosed, dual morbidity, that if you have a mental health issue, or another issue, that you won't be recognised and therefore be able to go through your gender or your transition or your support for that. There's some issues around young people not being under the age of 18, not being able to self-identify. So there are huge issues. What we did in 2004 was a step in the right direction. It's time for review.
Yeah, well, obviously, no use. Dan, can I just ask from the bottom very quickly, does your party have a policy on gender recognition, a specific policy on it, Rodney?
Well, look, you know, our party manifesto, which is a fine document, I'll adopt Malachi's approach of praising my party. It's a fine document full of lots of good ideas. There's some available downstairs. In terms of trans issues, yes, we want to see the same level of involvement to tackle transphobia as homophobia, but and also through the education system. But I think there's issues which politics are behind and political parties are behind, and maybe it's because there's been focuses or a focus elsewhere, and that gap has to be closed. But it's not new for the law to be behind the curve in terms of some of the issues that Ellen's raised, as well as politics being behind the curve. And I think that's an important gap that we need to close. But the question was, what will we do if we are elected? Offer a platform and a level of engagement that we can start to make progress on issues that, to an extent, haven't been given the attention I suspect that they should have been, because focus has been elsewhere. Because a lot of, you know, this evening's discussion has been absorbed into equal marriage.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, and then that involves a lot of the energy and the discussion, and the other issues maybe don't get the level of attention that they require. But that's something I think collectively we could all offer a commitment to do, to give a platform to other, and it's maybe not fair to say emerging issues because it's not new.
No.
But it falls within that category because it hasn't been acknowledged or dealt with yet.
Yeah. Michael, does your party have specific policy in relation to this issue?
In terms of the gender recognition bill in the south of Sinn Féin and Angus and Snoddy were heavily involved in that. In the south, one of the things that we've campaigned for, and we put it into our, God, I forgot the word, manifesto, is the, you know when your mind goes blank? In terms of the manifesto is the decentralisation of transgender services, and I was meeting with Tanny on that. In terms of the north, we firmly believe in self-declaration, that there should be no medical diagnosis in terms of that. What we also believe is that there needs to be more investment in transgender services and support, and I think we need to work closely with transgender organisations, and I would meet with Nicola Dorn of Sale on a regular basis in terms of that. You know, and I think it's something that all parties need to focus on. And again, and it has been mentioned before, mental health is a massive, massive issue in the transgender community.
Connor, from yourselves?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we are bringing forward, we have lots, our new LGBT plus group has been bringing forward lots of new policies and writing those up. The party manifesto overall is for the LGBT community, that is everyone. We are writing to put that into mental health services, where it's obviously housing, education, whatever the case may be. We cover everyone in the manifesto. We're covering a broad range, and we are putting specific policies in place. And I'd be glad to say tonight's conference we're proposing some very radical transgender specific motions to conference, and I'll be very happy to share those. So we are getting there, and we're developing those and growing as the day goes on.
Okay, Sophie?
So do we have a specific policy? We don't. I won't make any excuses. We just don't, and I apologise, and I'll do what I can to rectify it. We are a party that believes in equality for absolutely everybody. Nobody should be marginalised or left behind. In terms of what I would do practically, there's no way that I can understand the experiences or the issues facing transgender people, so I would allow them to tell me what's needed, and I would use the power that I have to lobby for that. So that's what I would do.
I'm going to skip over you, Molly. Go. If your party got specific policy or specific.
Well, we have a policy to bring forward a strategy for trans people. In terms of what exactly that would include, it would be kind of the same as Sophie. We would need to listen to the trans community. I mean, we do have policies around mental health, but investing more money in mental health issues for the LGBT community, and in terms of access to services as well. Equal access to services, but no, there is more to be done there, and there is more listening to be done with the Alliance.
Yeah, I think, and in conclusion, it seems that all the parties are saying that this is something that they hadn't looked at in great detail in the past. So, I mean, they obviously have a point that there is a section there that have been left behind from within the LGBT community.
Maybe it's something now for the next assembly. There's lots of all-party working groups, maybe an all-party working group to identify and engage with more communities out there and listen. You know, if we're all successful, we might have a large number of LGBT candidates in the Assembly. We can maybe lead the way on a working group, maybe to look at and identify more transgender and other issues that's out there.
There's a question was submitted online, which is actually quite interesting, because we're here and we're talking about equality and everybody joining together and fighting for equality. But the question is, why are there so many equal marriage groups? If all those groups can't even find equality with each other and all have to go sort of off on different tangents, I mean, why do you think there are so many groups? Is this a matter of parties all trying to do their own thing? Is it an ego thing? Is it people just trying to assert themselves above others? Do you think there should be one equal marriage lobbying group?
Well, yes, I don't really understand. Well, I think there should be. I don't really understand what the differences are between them, to be perfectly honest with you. So I wasn't aware that there was such a large number. So,
apparently so.
Yeah, I think absolutely there should be one.
And do you think it's something that all the parties would be happy to put their differences aside and join together and have one equal marriage lobby group?
I don't.
And maybe nominate a person to that group?
I don't really want to talk about marriage anymore. I think we know where we are on it. I think groups should all work together, but I think those should be led by LGBT people, the people who are disproportionately affected by this inequality, and that would be where I would always propose that liberation movements are led by the people who are oppressed. So as long as the marriage campaigns are led by queer people, then I'm happy with that.
Sophie, do you think there could be...
It's kind of like getting accused of splitting the unionist vote, and I usually say we're unionists for different reasons. If we all want the same outcome, then the only differences will be how to get there, and that'll probably come down to ego. So yes, I'd be happy to collaborate with one group.
Yeah, I think it's coming together. I think we watch, there's so many umbrellas of groups out there. There was one last week to do with construction and engineering. They came together under one umbrella and lobbied us and put questions to us. I think we're coming together under one umbrella. It's more powerful. It's one voice speaking together, and it goes back to the all-party working group. We can listen to one group, work together, and achieve what we want to achieve with equality. And
you think the party differences should be put aside on this issue, and people should have a working group that will work together? No, just after, just Michael.
I didn't know. I wasn't aware that there were so many marriage equality groups.
I'm only asking. But
I know there are quite a few online. I'm not too sure how that works out on the ground.
Yeah.
I think parties and sector organisations and men and women of goodwill should certainly come together in terms of this here. There's a lot of work to do. I think we have the next opportunity, the next mandate in terms of the blood ban, marriage equality, transgender rights, fertility rights for lesbian, bisexual women. By working together, I think we can do fantastic work.
Yeah, I suppose tactically, if the influence is greater by having more than one group in order to influence it, it's probably the better way to go. However, if it's competitive, as we've had with the EU referendum debate, where there seems to be both sides are expending more energy and trying to be the lead organisation in the debate rather than making the arguments either side, and then of course that's counterproductive. But if it's a way of getting influence where there wouldn't have been influence previously, of course, tactically it's the best thing to have more than one group, but cooperation's good within that as well.
I think we'll take one more question from the floor. Somebody had their hand up. They've obviously left before them out the room. Yeah, I'm just going to finish with this, Brendan.
Well, I see in some of the party manifestos that there's talk of wanting a sexual orientation strategy brought forward. As far as I'm aware, OFM, DFM have been responsible for this, and there was a consultation done in 2014, and thus far there is no sexual orientation strategy. So I suppose, unfortunately, DUP are not here, so I'll go to Sinn Féin. Why is there no sexual orientation strategy after 2 years following a consultation?
Well, we want to see a sexual orientation strategy, we want to see a robust one. It is a joint office, as you rightly pointed out, and the difficulty lies squarely with the DUP.
How does it lie squarely with the DUP? Are they blocking this, or what's going on?
Well, they're dragging their feet, let me put it that way. But let me also say that Sinn Féin is doing everything we can, and we'll keep pushing this here. It is going to happen, but in terms of the delay, it lies squarely with the DUP. They do not want to see this moving forward.
We had a commitment in not the mandate just finished, but the previous mandate, so we've actually been promised a sexual orientation strategy twice. Fool me once, fool me twice. Let's hope that the next mandate we actually see one come. And I think what's important is this responsibility is going to move to the Minister of the Communities. So we need a sympathetic and supportive Minister for the Communities. And it's not just to be a strategy, it needs to be funded. There needs to be money attached. LGBT sector organisations have not received money from OFM, DFM, despite them having responsibility for equality since we had a Labour Secretary of State in 2005. So you can imagine how underfunded and under capacity those organisations are. So I think it's imperative that we get a sexual orientation strategy in the next mandate. I would say that there's a couple of other things that haven't been touched on today that are in our queer manifesto. Review of hate crimes. We need to extend good relations. Currently, good relations only looks at race, political opinion and religion, and that's how we view our society. Only on those parameters? No, we need to look at disability, we need to look at gender, we need to look at sexual orientation. So we would be advocating extending the good relations categories to the hate crime categories. So there are, we've only started, I think, touching on some of the big LGBT issues, and I look forward to progress in the next mandate.
Although, I think we made great progress here in the fact that, as I said, it's historic. We've got 5 gay candidates. Rodney has joined us as well. It's unfortunate the DUP weren't here. Maybe next time. With regards to OFM, DFM, you want to try and get an answer from the press office, so good luck to you, because I can't even get them to send me an answer to your response, so you'll be doing well if you get any further there. Listen, I want to thank you all for coming, and I think we should all thank all the candidates, because they've been very open and been very candid. And we can also thank my 2 glamorous assistants in the corner. They got to sit down while I had to stand up in these heels the whole time. And obviously Belfast Pride for organising the event in the first place. And there are obviously many other issues of equality that I hope that we'll get to discuss and debate in the other hustings as the lead up to the election. Look, again, thank you all for coming. Okay, thanks very much. Good night. Okay.